Hey guys, what's up, Zyphon here, and in today's video we're going to be covering the top 15 most used weapons in Warframe. I'm not going to lie, this list was quite surprising. Now, everything that we're going to be talking about in today's video, this comes straight from the developers themselves. I'm going to have a link in the description below to basically the usage data for all of the Warframes and weapons, so you can go ahead and check it out yourself. We're going to be covering the different builds that I use on all of these different weapons in this video today, simply because I just want to help as many people as possible, and if these are the weapons that you guys are using, well, it makes sense to make a video showing you guys how to mod them. And fun fact, the most used Warframe is actually Vault or Vault Prime, so I'm going to go ahead and use a damage buffing build on Vault in today's demonstration as well. This is the build that we're going to be rocking on Vault or Vault Prime. I'm using the Shock Trooper augment for extra electric damage from his first ability, and we've also got Roar over his 4. I'm not going to be using the buffs all the time. I'm going to apply the buffs after we do like a already normal demonstration with the weapon with no buffs active. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 weapons at a time. So I'm going to cover a primary, a secondary, and a melee weapon. And first up we have the Nataruk, the Kuva Nukor, and the Zoris. So on the Nataruk, I'm running a build which looks like this. This is mainly to deal a big number with the initial hit and then have a nice sort of damage over time slash proc. We also have Prime Shot on here for the punch through and a little bit extra fire rate so we can charge up the bow a little bit faster. No elements here because it doesn't really matter. The Nataruk already deals a ton of damage anyway whenever you charge up the charge shot. You can see that there's a big difference between the regular charge shot and also a perfect shot. You get a higher crit chance and a higher crit damage multiplier on the perfect shot. Next up, we've got the Kuva Nukor, so you can go ahead and run a DPS build, which looks a little bit like this. Or if melee is your main way of dealing damage, you can go ahead and run a primer build that looks like this. But for today's demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and use the crit heat DPS build that I've got. And then last but not least, I have the Zoris. Now, this is sort of a min-max build for the Zoris, and this is basically just for the explosion wherever you go ahead and throw it. We're going to go ahead and be testing versus Steel Path level 215 Corrupted Heavy Gunners in this video. Alright, so this is the Nataruk on its own. We're going to go ahead and keep on landing these perfect shots over and over and over again, and as you can see, the main idea behind this is to just land those perfect shots and then let those slash procs do the majority of the work. We just deal a ton of damage just by letting those slash procs tick and deal, well, a ton of damage directly to the enemy's health through their armor. Then in the Kuva Nukor, we've got Skiajati Flare, so the more heat procs we land, the more bonus damage we're going to get. So if we will go ahead, hold down left click, you see that the damage just ramps up and up and up and up and up, and we eventually just shred these enemies away in basically no time. And we can't forget about the Zoris. You just go ahead and you throw it, you do the explosion by doing your left click, and as you can see, all these electric procs just spread to all of the enemies, and they, you know, basically just die. Like a massive grip of these enemies, just all dead to the Zoris, which is a very early beginner weapon that you can get. We did all of that without the buff, so now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cast Roar, and I'm going to go ahead and cast my first ability for the electric damage buff, and as you can see, we deal even more damage because, well, we've got damage buffing abilities on, and yeah, these enemies just die extremely quick. No real reason to overcomplicate it. One thing to note, if you're copying this loadout exactly, is that if you're using Vault with the Shock Trooper augment and you're using the Kuva Nukor with the exact same build, the sort of like free element or floating element is the heat damage. So what's going to happen is whenever you use Shock Trooper, the electric damage bonus is going to combine with the heat damage, and that's going to make radiation, so your Skiajati Flare isn't going to work. As you can see, if I just go ahead and hold down left click here, you can see that there's no heat proc. So you want to go ahead and swap out Skiajati Flare for something different, such as Secondary Merciless, if you plan on using your Shock Trooper or this loadout as it is. With Roar and Shock Trooper active, these guys die to the Zoris even faster, so this is a loadout that a lot of you guys run, and it's just quite insane for just getting missions done quickly, killing a lot of enemies, and just, you know, getting content done. So next up, we've got the Ignis Wraith with a build that looks like this. So this is just a viral heat build. We also have the Laetum, so we've got the Rapid Wrath evolution, we've got the Lethal Rearment evolution, the Elemental Excess evolution, and the Devouring Attrition evolution, and then finally we've got a Glaive Prime, and the Glaive Prime is literally just the Glaive Prime. We all know why this thing is on the list, but this is also a pretty sort of like high damage, kind of lazy loadout, I guess you could say. So the Ignis Wraith is good for just like killing those trash enemies running around taking those out. Then the Laetum is good for, you know, killing those VIP enemies like bosses and stuff like that. Then the Glaive Prime, you know, you can just nuke rooms with it. Like, it's pretty insane. It's got that force slash whenever you go ahead and make it explode. So the Ignis Wraith definitely isn't the most damaging weapon in the game. So as you can see, like, we're not dealing a ton of damage here, and it is quite slow to kill, but it's passable. Like, considering the fact that these are steel path enemies, they're level 215, they've got a lot of armor and all that their stuff, you know, you kill them quite quickly, but it does take a little bit of just holding down left click. Of course, as you get more kills, you're going to be dealing even more damage because of the primary merciless that we've got on, but it's not my go-to weapon for killing these high-value targets, or even in steel path content in general, but it definitely does work. Then with the Laetum, all you have to do is land your headshots, and then go ahead and trigger your alt fire, and as you can see, this thing just absolutely shreds. Way more damage than the Ignis Wraith. And then we've also got the Glaive Prime. Now, this thing just speaks for itself. You got all these slash procs, all these enemies literally just die. Now, all of that was without the buffs yet again. So again, if you go ahead and use Shock Trooper on your Ignis Wraith, the viral heat is going to turn to viral radiation. Now, that can be good in some circumstances where you want to take down like a high value target, like an alloyed armor enemy or something like that, where radiation damage is going to give you bonus damage. In that case, it's okay, but it's definitely not ideal for every single scenario. So here is the Shock Trooper and also Aurora combo on the Ignis Wraith. You can see that we do kill quite a bit faster, and that's due to, you know, Roar just being quite insane. Now let's go ahead and test out the Laetum with the Incarnum buff on. As you can see, kill really fast again. We've got radiation on this too. Again, it's because of the viral heat combo, so the electric is combining with the heat and sort of messing with it that way. But good if you want to take down those high value targets like the bosses. And then on the Glaive Prime, as you can see, basically no difference here. It just shreds everything. Alright, so next up on our list, we have the Felarx. So I'm running the Frictionless Flight Evo 2, the Evolved Autoloader Evo 3, the Racking Wrath Evo 4, and the Devastating Attrition Evo 5. I'm running another viral heat build on this, but this time we're using primary deadhead, so I have to be going for those headshots, and I have to be careful with Shock Trooper again. For the secondary, we've got the Epitaph. Now on this, I'm using a viral heat or viral electric build. I'm running viral electric because I'm using Volt with Shock Trooper. This is a primer build though, so just keep that in mind. You can have a single target build, or you can have a trash clear build, so this is just the smaller mobs that you can deal with this build. And then next up, we've got the Broken War. Now this is just one of those weapons that you get from doing the story quests as well. You get this from the second dream, and I see a lot of players just running around with this thing as like their go-to melee weapon all the time. It's pretty okay because I'm running the Epitaph with a primer build here. This is the build that I'm running on the Broken War. Condition Overload, it gives you more damage based on the amount of status effects that are applied to the enemy, so having a primer is pretty much essential. But the main star of the show here is going to be the Felarx. So first up, we have the Felarx. Now I've got a few deadhead stacks already, and as you can see, even without any buffs, this thing just absolutely shreds. It definitely deserves to be one of the most used weapons in the game. The reload for it is a little bit slow though. It's not the best, but it's passable. And then we've got the Incarnate form. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Incarnate form because it takes so long to whip out, but whenever you do eventually whip it out, like, you can kill a lot of enemies, like, just with a few shots, just because the projectile goes through them all. It's okay, but it's not really my cup of tea, to be honest. I prefer just keeping it in the normal shotgun mode. But if you like the Incarnate form, that's totally cool as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to prime all the enemies with the Epitaph here, and we're just going to go ahead and melee with the Broken War. Now this thing isn't going to deal the most damage versus these enemies. You will eventually kill them, as you can see, the more you melee, because we have Blood Rush equipped. Got Condition Overload on there for more damage and stuff like that. But really, this type of setup, because the weapons are just kind of meh, it shines more whenever you go ahead and you throw those buffs on, like so. So now we deal a lot more damage. So you can definitely take the Broken War into, you know, high level content if you really want to. Just, I don't know, I wouldn't really recommend it. You're better off using the Zoris like we showed earlier, because you get that a lot earlier than you get the Broken War. And at least I think so. I can't remember. But you get it quite early, and it's just a far better weapon. So yeah, you kill more enemies in a single swing. Do I even really need to show the Felarx with a buff on? Like, this thing is just going to shred with all these buffs, even though it makes, what's it called? Corrosive or viral or radiation instead of viral heat. So yeah, this thing is just a nuts weapon. Here's the incarnate form with all the buffs as well. Oh, see, that's what I mean. That's why I don't like the incarnate form. The incarnate form swap on the Felarx is just so slow compared to all the other ones. Like, I'm so slow. Okay, here we go. So there's the incarnate form with the buffs, aiming for headshots. Yeah, you do kill quite quickly, but that incarnate form swap just is not my cup of tea. Next up, we've got the Tenet Plasmore. I've got a Tenet Cycron. Now, this has heat on it at base, so I can use Cascadia Flare here. And then finally, for the melee, we've got the Skiajati, and this is a heavy melee attack build. I was a big fan of the Plasmore and the Tenet Plasmore whenever they both first came out, but now I'm not that big of a fan. This is going to give you Nataruk vibes, so this is without any buffs active, and you're really leveraging the fire rate coming from your fire rate mod to make this weapon usable, because if you don't have fire rate on here, it's kind of a pain in the butt, and you really need to be getting those kills to make use of the primary merciless to up the damage even more. As you guys can see, we're dealing a lot more damage now. And really what's happening is we have high base damage, which is nice, but of course the enemy's armor sort of negates that. But then the viral procs and the slash procs just eat away at the enemy's health by so much, you know? So it's basically just like a worse Nataruk in my opinion, but it's got the added benefit of having radiation built into it, so versus enemies that are weak to radiation, it can be pretty good. So next up, we've got the Tenet Cycron. Now this thing does just shred. You can see that we just have to hold down left click and the bad guys just die. It's not the fastest at killing things, and it's got this annoying mechanic for its ammo. Whenever you hit 0, you gotta wait for it to recharge, which I'm not that big of a fan of, but you can't really deny that it does just get the job done. It kills enemies. You imagine using this versus like a nullifier bubble or something like that, and like it's just gonna be shredded away in basically no time. Not my favorite secondary, but definitely one worth considering if you've got access to killing the sisters. And now last but not least, we've got the Skiajati. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hold down E until we build up a 12 times combo, and then we're going to spend that combo to do a heavy attack. And as you can see, we deal a lot of damage via the slash procs on the heavy attack to these enemies. So just building up combo pretty quickly and then spending the combo for a slash proc to hit multiple enemies or something like that. It's the way to go with this build. I definitely prefer the Skiajati over the Broken War. So the unfortunate thing with the Tenet Plasmore here is I have base toxin damage, right? But I also have a single frigid blast mod on to make the viral, because it's just going to combine with that toxin. The unfortunate thing is if I go ahead and I cast my first ability to get the damage buff, what's going to happen is it's going to turn into magnetic damage, which isn't what we want versus these armored enemies. So it's definitely worth avoiding using Shock Trooper when you're using a Tenet Plasmore, a viral build, which is only making use of the Frigid Blast mod to make viral if you want to hold on to your viral. Viral is a very important part of this build. You don't want to be getting rid of it. So for that reason, I'm not going to be using Shock Trooper whenever I'm demonstrating this build and the Cycron with the buffs. So we just casted Roar here. We just go ahead and we left click, and as you can see, we're dealing a lot more damage, and that damage ramp up after we get our primary merciless stacks is also going to be far more noticeable as well. And then with the Tenet Cycron, I could use Shock Trooper here, but this is just with Roar active. And as you can see, like the enemies die very, very, very quick just by holding down left click. I'm going to go ahead and use Shock Trooper just for the hell of it. But just remember that if you use Shock Trooper with this build, what's going to happen is your heat is going to go away. It's going to make radiation, so you're going to have to replace that Cascadia Flare Arcane with something different. As you can see, my damage just went all the way down because we can't get that bonus damage from Cascadia Flare. The Skiajati with the buffs looks a little bit like this, so we can actually use Shock Trooper here. So we build up that combo. Very good, very nice. We go ahead and we do that middle mouse button. And as you can see, bad guys literally just die. Alright, so next up we've got the Tenet Envoy, and the build that I'm rocking on it looks a little bit like this. Next up we've got the Sporelacer. Now I'm going to show you guys a beginner-based Sporelacer rather than the meta one that everybody shows. For the simple fact that there's not much difference between what I'm showing in today's video and also the meta one that everybody goes for. So the meta one is the Sporelacer, the Haymaker, and the Splat. And the one that I've got is Sporelacer, Haymaker, and Deep Breath. Now the reason that I went for Deep Breath is because you just get that a lot earlier than you get Splat. And like whenever it comes to getting a weapon like this, I don't think it is the most insane weapon in the game. Like everybody says that it's good, but it's just not the most insane, you know? So what I would say to a newer player coming to the game, like, this is a good weapon to get quite early on because you can use kit guns as early as Master Rank 0. So if you wanted to, you could go out of your way, craft this beginner cheap version. Then if you like it, you can go on and make the meta version later on whenever you've got more resources and stuff like that. And because I'm showing a beginner Sporelacer, I'm also just going to show a beginner Sporelacer build. So it's not the most insane thing in the world, but it will kill bad guys, especially with buffs. And then last but not least for melee, I've got a Nakana Prime here. Now I'm running a very basic build on this melee weapon because I'm not really interested in investing any more into it. The real star of the show is probably going to be the Tenet Envoy here. Tenet Envoy, long story short, big boom. Just go ahead, aim down sights, aim at the ground, aim at the bad guys, whatever. And as you can see, lots of viral, lots of slash. Bad guys take damage over time. Bad guys die. That's just how it is. Kuva Zar is a lot better. Not too sure why this thing is more popular than the Kuva Zar. Maybe it's because it has more ammo. Next up, we've got the Sporelacer. Now, like I said, this build isn't going to be insane because it is a beginner build. But as you can see, we are taking away the enemy's health by quite a bit, even though we have pretty bad mods. If I incorporate my roar buff, which is what I would recommend if I told someone to get this, you can see that we deal even more damage. And if you really wanted to, you could use Shock Trooper here to make your viral and your radiation damage. Perfect for taking down those alloy armored enemies. But you could definitely get a more optimal Sporelacer makeup and also Sporelacer build than what I'm showing in today's video. I'm just sort of showing this to make you guys aware that this weapon does exist. It is a weapon that is good because, as you can see, it damages multiple enemies at the one time. You can make a more optimal build, both with the parts and the mods to, you know, make it deal even more damage. And you can get it extremely early, so if you don't know what secondary weapon to go for at the beginning of the game, a Sporelacer is probably your best bet. Then the Nakana Prime, I'm going to go ahead cast Roar here, and it's just a matter of meleeing, build up your combo, same with the Skiajati, and then just go ahead and middle mouse button to do a heavy strike. And you can see a ton of slash procs. Lots of damage. I've also got Shock Trooper equipped right now as well, so that's buffing up the damage a little bit too. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But guys, that is pretty much the list of the 15 most used weapons. I tried to make sure to include a primary, secondary, and melee for each of the sort of loadouts. Now, I'm not saying that you have to run like those weapons in those specific loadouts. Like, you could go and you could take the Nataruk, you could take the Glaive, you could take whatever secondary weapon that you liked and just throw them all together. I just wanted to make a video showing like all of the builds for the weapons that you guys use the most based off of Warframe stats. So that is pretty much it for the video. If you guys liked it, go ahead, hit that like button below. If you want to see more Warframe content from me, hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.